Automotives, a podcast covering the most important issues for the automotive aftermarket industry in Europe and beyond. Brought to you by Fajifa.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us one more time. This is a new episode of Automotives, a podcast series discussing the most important issues of the automotive industry in general, at the independent parts and maintenance sector in particular. My name is Alvaro de la Cruz, Head of Communications of IGFA, and I am your host. Today, I am deeply pleased to be hosting Mr. Luis Shakinovsky, President of ECAR and for over 50 years, and a top executive of Belron, maybe well known by you as Carglass. Thank you for being with us, Luis. Welcome.
Thank you, Alvaro. Pleasure to be here.
So we are meeting today because there's a very important issue for our sector on the table. It is nothing less but the reverse clause under the European Directive for Design Protection. This is not a new issue. Most of you will be aware of this piece of legislation that has been on the table by the Commission for almost 30 years now, but now it's back on track. Very, very briefly, and I will let Mr. Shakinovsky explain in detail, but very briefly, this issue actually affects the visible components of your car when it comes to repairing. And actually, right now, there's no harmonization in Europe, and we don't always have the possibility of choosing an independent part to replace a visible component or body part of our cars. We believe this is not a fair situation. It actually is not justifiable, the lack of competition in this area, and we welcome that this piece of legislation is once again discussed and hopefully soon in place. So I think Mr. Shakinovsky is a perfect guest to discuss this topic because he has an extensive experience working in the area. At the end of the day, car glass is one of the components that are replaced the most often in a car, and Belron is the biggest producer, the world's largest producer of glass, and I think he will give you the perfect insights on this area. So, first of all, Luis, you were for over 50 years executive of Belron in different positions. Can you explain a little bit your trajectory in the company and exactly what have you been dealing with, and how is actually ECAR, the European Alliance for the campaign of car repair, working on this issue?
Alvaro, thank you. Just a short correction. Belron doesn't produce automotive glass. It repairs and replaces it.
Right.
And as you correctly said, it's the world's largest glass repair and replacement company. By way of explanation, perhaps, it does about 15 million jobs in 40 countries in 2022. And where it impacts on Europe is about 25% of those, roughly 4 million, relate to European motorists. So if you boil it down, it's somewhere along the line of 11,000 motorists have their glass repaired or replaced every single day in Europe. That's quite a lot. It's every minute, 7 people are having their glass repaired. So it has an immediate and important impact. As you correctly said, I've been with Belron for about 51 years, global head of legal and on the board for 30 years, and then as a non-executive independent director. And as Laurence will tell you, I've been the chairman of ECAR for 27 years, because this has always been a pretty important problem and issue for all visible repairs, not just glass and not just Belron.
Understood. And as a follow-up on this, maybe you could explain us a little bit what the problem, the direct implication for the consumers, and what the problem is for the non-harmonization in the European market for these visible must match spare parts.
I think that just slightly ahead of doing that, it may help if I explain that what ECAR is, Alvaro.
Sure.
Because it really needs an understanding to recognize the support behind the repairs clause legislation and the problem that it's caused. So may I explain a little
Please.
bit about ECAR?
Yes, please do so.
Very good. Well, ECAR is an alliance of EU associations, and they represent the independent aftermarket, wholesalers, body parts producers, automotive glass distributors and repairers like us, and installers. And over the years, we've had support from the insurers and from the parts suppliers, and of course, ultimately from the consumers, because they're the ones that essentially are affected. So I suppose in summary, ECO was formed to secure a fair and equitable competitive market for visible automotive spare parts. And as you also mentioned, this has been going on for something like 30 years, and we haven't been able to finally achieve the harmonization of must match European spare parts. Your question on harmonization, of course, is the relevant one because it leads to discrimination between different EU countries as to the protection of what is relevant and what is not relevant. There's confusion, there's litigation, and we've been involved in litigation of our own. Cross border market activities are complex. And at the end of the day, also, it impacts on competitiveness because you're unable to have the ease of repair and replacement by specialists, and you get consequently the higher price for repairs in the countries without a repairs clause. So I think that's the impact of non-harmonization of our.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it's I think it's quite clear. Now, the issue is in many occasions, consumers cannot go and decide which parts can be installed, visible parts can be installed in their cars when repaired. When it comes, for example, to your experience with car glass, is there any difference in terms of quality from the original manufacturer's glass and the ones that Belgium is installing in the aftermarket?
That was a question they asked me in the European Parliament nearly 26 years ago, and I gave them the same answer. I We actually showed them two pieces of glass and asked them if they could tell the difference, and they came up with many theories. And we pointed out actually there was no difference. They both came from the same manufacturer, but the one had a logo and cost more. But there is no difference between the glass. We buy the same glass from the same manufacturers who are well known throughout the EU. People like Saint-Gobain, people like Pilkingtons, Asahi, highly reputable, and pretty much everybody of repute buys their glass from people who comply with the quality and safety conditions set by the European standards.
Okay, so could you maybe explain to us who are non-experts in the issue how vehicle manufacturers are trying to litigate the independent producers and distributors to their own profit actually?
Well, you can understand that there are practices which tend to be non-competitive and monopolistic, where people are trying to protect a huge market or keep other people out of a market. So what has happened over the years, and I speak from experience, is we've had litigation uh, uh, by people attempting to prevent the use of visible spare parts, claiming that they're design protected. And we've always countered by saying that there's no protection for must match spare parts. You can't put a bumper of one car or a piece of glass meant for one car into another car. And so we've had some fairly high profile court cases in a few of the European countries. And once we've presented all the evidence, either the case has been withdrawn or we've had judgment in our favor. I don't want to go into detail about the people involved and the litigants, but essentially, once we tend to get to court or present our defense, and that's not just us, that's people like us, it tends to go away. But nevertheless, if you can't afford to litigate, you can go out of business.
Yeah. So this directly affects the independent operators, but also European consumers that at the end of the day cannot choose from different providers and different prices and a wider range of products. In many cases, they're condemned to go with just the manufacturer original part.
Well, that would be the effect of design protection.
Okay. So in conclusion around this, maybe you could explain whether this proposal by the Commission again on the table would really address the issue correctly, both for all the stakeholders involved, the consumers, and also whether harmonization in Europe will also provide a framework in which all players can compete fairly, and also, of course, the original parts distributors.
Alvaro, we certainly do hope that the Council of Ministers will come out in full support of the repairs clause. And there's good reason to hope this, one of which is that there has been quite a lot of mindset change throughout Europe in recognition that the repairs clause is the right, proper, fair, and equitable answer to the design protection issue, in particular for the consumers. So, yes, I do believe that the Council will make the right decision.
Well, that was really fantastic. I think you described perfectly the problem. Your insights are really great for us and for our audience. Everybody or almost every household in Europe owns at least a car that eventually needs a spare part to be replaced. And if it's a visible one, you shouldn't be obliged to go to the original manufacturer. So I think we need to strongly support this from every member state in Europe. It affects again almost every household. Thank you very much, Luis. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you very much, all of you from wherever you were listening to join us. Stay tuned. Soon we will bring another episode discussing the regulation right now taking place in the European trialogue, the Data Act. So stay tuned. We'll come back soon. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you, Alvaro, and to you.
Thank you.
That was today's Automotives episode. Subscribe to our channels for more to come.